Okay, so hi everybody, welcome back to yet another episode of Faith Brunel's Insights. I'm Faith Brunel, and today I'm joined by Adanna. Adanna, how are you today?
I'm fabulous. Okay,
I'm having a lighting issue, everybody. There you
it's
go,
fine.
carry
It's
on.
fine. I'm fabulous. Literally
Wonderful.
just got back from Morocco.
Hmm.
Um, had a really good trip. Spent 5 days there for my friend's wedding. So I'm feeling really relaxed. I'm going back to work tomorrow. So it carries on going, but altogether, really good. Really, really good.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that, and I hope that you had a wonderful trip. I hope you had a wonderful trip in Morocco. I hope that it was relaxing for you as you head back to work
It
tomorrow.
was. It was.
I'm
It was.
glad.
No, I definitely needed the break, but yeah, it was. It was
That's
amazing.
what I always say to the listeners as well. It's good to have a work-life balance as well, to have time for yourself, because if you're constantly just pushing yourself to study, to work, to do whatever you're doing, you can sometimes feel quite burnt out. And so that's one of the episodes I was doing recently in my series, Work and Study Smarter, Boosting Your Productivity, was to actually delve right into the crux of burnout and how to develop some strategies and some frameworks by which to deal with that. But yeah, so Adanna, talk to me a little bit about your journey from being a head family law paralegal to aspiring to become a barrister, specializing in family law, because this is very impressive. But can you tell me a little bit about the pivotal moments or experiences that led you to this particular career path?
Oh wow, loaded question.
Yes.
The thing is, I didn't start off with family law
Mm-hmm.
at all. I was more so very, very passionate about criminal law.
Yeah.
I think when you see the crime dramas, you see everything, you're just like, wow, yeah, I want to be that. I want to be that.
Yeah.
But I started off mainly in criminal law. And then something really crazy happened with COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
COVID-19 was a very, very daunting period for people all across London, all across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
So many people died. So many people didn't have access to basic necessities.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back at this now, I realized that this was one of the things that led me to have an interest in families
Yeah.
generally. I didn't know it at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but now I know it looking back. And I remember being in my room, and I was just like, there's so many people, especially from low socioeconomic backgrounds,
Yeah.
that are suffering
Mm-hmm.
financially because of COVID-19.
Definitely.
People are on furlough. Mum and dad don't work.
Mm-hmm.
Even in school, speaking to so many head teachers, they literally said that those from lower economical backgrounds
Mm-hmm.
were doing worse in school.
Yeah.
And they link that to COVID-19. So I remember I was sitting in my grandma's house and I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what, I need to do something about it. So that's what started the Response UK. Now, the Response UK, its main element was to
Mm-hmm.
basically help families.
Yeah.
And looking back at it now, I realized that with family law, how I'm studying it now, or how I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing it, I should
Yeah.
say, it was always a passion to help families. Even though that didn't move me, even when I was doing the Response UK, I was still all about criminal law. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to be a criminal law barrister. But then what happened after that is I got a scholarship,
Yeah.
which I know you're going to ask me about later. But I got a scholarship,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the exercises in the scholarship was to do a public speaking exercise. Barristers call it advocacy,
Yeah.
and in that, we had to do a non-molestation order. Non-molestation order being domestic, when someone alleges domestic violence against another
Mm-hmm.
person. I looked at the brief. I was just like, I love this.
Yeah.
And from there, it all came together. So I was midway through doing my BTC, and
Mm-hmm.
everything just started to connect.
To line up. Yeah.
Yeah, just started to line up, and I was just like, wow, family law.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. So that's why I'm here now. I'm
Yeah.
a family law paralegal, and I want to be a family law barrister.
Well done, and clearly, I can really see the passion coming through. I can really see the passion emanating through your very body language as well. How you're really enthusiastic to talk about families, and indeed, the familiar setting is important, because if you come from a family that's a broken home, broken family, it can definitely have an impact on both your mental health, but also in terms of your academic journey and success as well. And there is across the board, there is statistics and studies that do show that children who are from a broken family or from a broken home do suffer more as well. That's not to neglect the other obviously the struggle of those who haven't got a broken family, but there is something that does set them apart because they might not have had that familiar support or that framework by which they felt supported into. And I'm sure, you know, as you mentioned as well, reverting back to COVID, that was, you know, that would really ushered in a paradigm shift, you know, in terms of internationally paradigm shift, because even myself, I was actually impacted because I didn't actually sit for my A levels. I was part of the COVID cohort. And then I started reading politics at King's College London in the midst of COVID-19. In my first year, I had 2 weeks of in-person teaching and study, and then I was put online. And so it did actually alter the way I was learning. And so there was an impact because, you know, everything became digital, everything was moved online. And so some students are actually now talking to universities and saying that my experience wasn't what I expected to, which is another topic. But yes, thank you for sharing about, you know, that kind of the inception of and the context behind the inception of Response UK, thinking about, you know, why you actually so passionate about families as well. And, you know, I can say as an aspiring barrister myself, sometimes we actually, when we're thinking about our career, we think that we want to do a particular type of law, but then we're actually exposed to certain experiences that actually cause us to reconsider that and say, hang on, let me do something else. And that happens for myself as well. I wanted to do commercial law because I undertook a Bright Network law internship in commercial law. And I said, actually, it was good. But then I actually, you know, I did some research about human rights law, international law, and that was what really piqued my interest. And that's where we are now. I actually want to talk to you about your scholarship as well, because you know, congratulations on acquiring a scholarship, because I know law is competitive. But talk to me a little bit about the scholarship. Talk to me about kind of what that actually entailed for you and how that actually helped you to propel your journey to becoming to being an aspiring barrister.
Amazing. The scholarship was very, very pivotal because for me, a lot of opportunities came out of that scholarship for me. I remember my friend, she went to bar school before me, so she got the scholarship as well. And she was just like, Adanna, I really feel like you should apply for this. And it's called the Past Scholarship with the Inner Temple. I love the Inner Temple. The Inner Temple is so inclusive. They see you for where you are and they want to bring you along. They want to make you better. So I applied for the scholarship. I was successful in getting the scholarship. And a lot of the scholarship, what it entailed essentially was just networking. So you would speak to barristers, you will speak to judges. And that really allowed the experience of law to be much closer to me. I grew up in a council estate, but all of my parents were academics. My mom's an academic, my dad is an academic, my brothers are academics as well. But it was still that feeling of being so distant from law. So distant. So it's like, if you had a passion, I mean, A levels, I did very, very well in A levels. But the doors just kept getting shut. So it's like, I would apply here and they'll be like, you know what, we really loved your CV. We really loved the interview, but you weren't successful. So doors were just shutting. So this scholarship was, alongside my BTC, the course, was one of the times where I actually had a foot in the room. I was able to see a barrister that has been practicing for 20 years across from me. I mean, able to speak to judges. And I really built a connection with a particular judge in the criminal and family courts. And he actually allowed me to marshal for him. And that was one of the most distinctive opportunities that I had, because as I said before, everything was just closed doors. But he really said, you know what, you're a really bright girl. I see that you're so passionate about criminal law and family law. Come and marshal. So I marshaled for 2 weeks. And my confidence in the space of law really increased dramatically. And that all came through the scholarship. And I would say anyone that's pursuing a scholarship, even though it may not be monetary, as in you don't get, because you know there's some scholarships where you end up getting money in the end. And there's sometimes with scholarships where you just enter into a room. And people sometimes neglect those scholarships because they're not paying them anything. I would really encourage anyone, get in the room. Like, you don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know what conversations you will have. You do not know what opportunities will come from that. And I'm really glad that I took on the scholarship. And with the scholarship as well, within the Temple, you also get a mini pupillage as well. So I just completed a mini pupillage about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So the scholarship was definitely beneficial. And I would definitely say anyone that is going into the Inner Temple, definitely apply for the Past Scholarship or any scholarship.
It's worth it, yes. And yeah, I think it's important actually that you do make that really important point, because sometimes we can intrinsically overlook, you know, we can intrinsically overlook scholarships that aren't monetary, as you said, because sometimes in our immediate thought, and it's not a bad thought to have, because law, your fees are expensive, especially if you're going to do a master's. Your student fines will only cover one postgraduate course, and then it's self-funded unless you get a scholarship. So sometimes in the back of your mind, subconsciously, you're like, oh, I need money to be able to study. But as Adanna has just said, and I will reiterate that, do not neglect or overlook the scholarships that might not necessarily be monetary, but as you said, you've got into the room. And actually, upon reflecting and listening to your story, I actually wrote down 2 words. The first one was exposure, and the second one was networking, because both of those coming together has actually catapulted you and put you into the right position. Because if you weren't in the room, if you weren't able to network, you wouldn't have had the mini pupillage. You wouldn't have had those actually experiences, as you said, to marshal for 2 weeks. And now, and as I said, in law, every experience is worthwhile. I remember in January of this year, I actually attended an event held by the Bar Association in London, and that was very insightful because I got to network with like-minded individuals. And I actually have a mentor who is a King's Counsel, and so every time we meet, we talk about what we need to do in terms of where I am in terms of applications and looking forward. And truly, Adanna, you've really demonstrated to myself and the listeners that there is an importance of just putting yourself out there, as you said, because it would have been easy for you to just say, you know what, I've been born in a council estate, I can't do this, and imposter syndrome could have easily taken over. And that's actually a question that I haven't actually given you, but as I said to you before we started, I like to just pop questions in. Now, thinking about imposter syndrome, so personally, have you ever experienced it? If so, how have you overcome it? But even if you haven't experienced it, what tips would you give to aspiring legal professionals, aspiring professionals as a whole in different sectors who are experiencing or kind of battling with imposter syndrome?
Perfect. I was actually going to interject you in speaking about imposter syndrome.
I'm glad.
I believe that that's one of the main barriers that stop people from exposure and getting into the room. I remember in the Inner Temple, the scholarship, there was a dinner that we had to attend. Now, there is still some sort of limitations ethnically regarding people in the bar. That's something that is well known. And obviously that's why I love the Inner Temple so much, because they are essentially bridging that gap. I remember walking into this room, I saw about 3 people that looked like me.
Wow.
The first thing that came to mind, which was just an immediate response, was, wow, I don't belong here. Literally the first thing. And I remember I was with my friend, and we were just like, we looked at each other and we said, no, we're gonna speak to everyone. Like literally gonna speak to everyone. And that was one of my main reasons, or one of my main motivations for overcoming imposter syndrome. The thing is that yes, even as if you're a Black female and you're listening to this, there's not many like us in the bar at the moment. However, that reality doesn't stop us from stepping out of our comfort zone. It doesn't stop us from actually being like, do you know what? I'm actually going to speak to somebody that looks nothing like me. And I remember going in there, Leslie KC was there from Garden Chambers. And I remember speaking to so many Queen Counsels at that time. And to so many different barristers, and they were absolutely amazing. And they were just wanted to embrace me. Any questions I had, whether silly or not, they just wanted to embrace me. So one of the things that I would say for overcoming imposter syndrome is you have to move out from fear. You have to.
Because fear can be crippling.
Fear is crippling. Fear destabilizes. Fear minimizes. But it takes a lot to say to yourself, regardless of the experiences that I've heard, the experiences that I'm encountering, I'm going to get out there, and I'm going to, and I'm going to believe in myself so much to start a conversation with someone that looks nothing like me.
And
even in my work, because I do have a senior role as a paralegal, I'm always speaking to barristers, always speaking to people that are different than me. And if I was in fear, I wouldn't be working as well as I'm working now. So to anyone who's imposter syndrome has been a cycle that you've been going through, I would say it takes a lot of courage to just say it's not going to have any form of over me, and I'm going
it's time
to just
break it now. Yeah, it's time to break that cycle of imposter syndrome. And obviously, it's not as easy as, it's not as easy as waking up one day, but it's a journey, as we always say on the Favorite Insights podcast. It's not an event, it's a journey, but your journey can begin now to break that cycle to imposter syndrome. And if you do need help, there are services out there. There's a lot of counselling services people have benefited from. So do seek the help you need, and don't be ashamed to admit that you need support as well, because as Adanna said, walking into a room and seeing people who look nothing like you, something I'm very familiar with, but it shouldn't be something that stops you. It should be something that says, actually, I have a unique perspective to offer here, so I'm going to go in, as he said, network and socialize. And as you said, these people weren't even nasty, they were nice people, they answered your questions, even if you thought they were silly questions. But if you'd let your mindset be if you'd let all those negative thoughts stop you, you wouldn't be here today. You wouldn't have been recommended by the Right Honourable Oliver Dowden, as one of the best public speakers that he's encountered, which is a significant achievement. But if you let your imposter syndrome stop you, you would literally not be here now. So thank you for actually shedding some light on imposter syndrome, because I always maintain that it's really important that you're mentally, that you're mentally able, and you feel like your mental health is being prioritized, because at the end of the day, a degree is a degree, but it shouldn't come at the cost of your mental health, because I think that you have to make sure you're there.
Definitely. And I would even add on to that, and I would say imposter syndrome sometimes is the manifestation of fear to make mistakes. Fear to get things wrong. And throughout my career now, I'll be lying if I said that I haven't made mistakes. Literally, I have made mistakes. But when the mistakes happen, I'm like, oh, well, no one died, actually died. And that has taught me so much about being bolder, because sometimes when we want to keep ourselves in, it is a manifestation of the fear that, oh, I may actually get this wrong, or oh, I may actually look stupid, or oh, people may see that I'm not adequate. But for anyone watching, so what? Literally every mistake that you make, be introspective and just be like, okay, I've made this mistake. And obviously people that are even young in their careers that haven't done their BTC yet, this is the perfect time to make mistakes so that you can learn and you don't make them again.
That's very true.
So definitely imposter syndrome, it is very difficult. It is a cycle, but take the first step of saying, I'm not going to allow this to control me.
Exactly. Wonderful thoughts there and insights from you, Adanna, on a topic that we never even planned to discuss, but God knows everything, so it just cropped up in my mind. So I thought I'm going to ask you. So as we mentioned, that you were commended by the Right Honourable Oliver Dowden as one of the best public speakers he's encountered. That is significant achievement. I just take a moment there to just acknowledge that is a significant achievement.
Thank you.
But can you just provide some insights into effective public speaking, especially when you're addressing important topics like like anything really, like especially like reforms for hate crimes as well, which is something that is unfortunately prevalent in society. But can you talk to us about kind of some of your structures or what you actually do in preparation for that as well?
Okay, perfect. I'll say three things. I think this is suitable because we just came off the back of a conversation concerning syndrome. But the first thing is confidence and courage. And I'll break that into two things. Number one, you have to know your audience. Know who you're speaking to. So I remember going in their patchwork scholarship, one of the managing directors phoned me and they were like, you know what, like we've seen you whenever we join together. We really want you to lead this presentation to Right Honourable Oliver Dowden. And I was just like, whoa, there's no way I'm going to do this. And when that happened, I had to kind of work myself up in confidence, essentially. And I remember jotting down what it was I was going to speak about. And it goes into my 2 points. I'm waffling. Number one, know the audience. Know the audience. So in this particular situation, whenever you're speaking to anyone, know who you're speaking to, essentially. So here I was speaking to a panel of esteemed people. I was speaking to the founder of the Patchwork Foundation. I think he's retired now, Right Honourable Oliver Dowden. And I think there was another, it was the head of SEGRO. And they were really interested concerning hate crime policies. They were very, very interested as well concerning COVID-19 and the way that creativity, the creative industry had been impacted because of COVID-19. So first thing I had to reckon is, who's my audience?
Yeah.
And in that allowed me to communicate certain messages to them.
Yeah.
The second thing after knowing the audience is know the message.
Mm-hmm.
When I was doing my advocacy, because in the BTC,
Mm-hmm.
you're trained in advocacy. And I remember my teacher said to me, she was just like, how long do you think people take to drift off whenever you're speaking? And I think she said something, I think it was less than 5 seconds. She said it's less than 5 seconds. And literally what she was telling us is get straight to the point, essentially. So when you know your message and you know exactly what you want to communicate and you know the ethos behind what you're saying, people just pick it up. Literally, because the human brain naturally wanders everywhere.
Yes, it does.
So once you know your message and you know who you're speaking to, they're able to come back and they'll be like, wow, that was very impactful. Yeah. She knew exactly who we were, and she knew the message that she was trying to communicate. So when I was doing the speech, those were literally my 3 points: confidence, know the audience, know the message. And once I start, even in public speaking, even in advocacy, because I do a lot of advocacy as a barrister as well.
Yeah.
But as I literally just keep ruminating those principles, and they've always proved effective.
Yeah. So those principles are definitely principles that need to be reiterated as well, because when you research your audience, it shows them that you are interested. It shows them that you are engaged and that you are someone that they can buy into and give, they can give you their time as well, and their energy, because as you said, that the human brain does wander. Sometimes we are sitting there and then we find ourselves just wondering about random things that have no relation or correspondence to what we're doing, but that's just part of life. And just finally, before we end this interview today, I want to talk to you a lot about a bit about, because this is where we're ending here, but about your non-profit organization, which you actually made reference to in the beginning, called the Response UK, which is very inspiring and interesting. Could you just briefly talk to us about its mission and some of the impactful outreach activities you've conducted, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, so the Response UK was active. Its sole purpose was for COVID-19. I'm currently revising things to how to bring it to modern day. There's a lot of different networks that I want to bring into the Response UK. But essentially, our mission in COVID-19 was basically to provide essentials to families that were affected in COVID-19. As I said previously, people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds were gravely affected by COVID-19, whether it be their attendance, whether it was even them getting the virus, things like overcrowding, things like parents not being able to feed their children because they didn't have basic things. I'm talking about people in poverty in this. And my heart really broke for the family system. One thing that I always say is that the family system is the bedrock of society. Break the family down, you've broken down society. So that's why I'm so passionate about family law. I'm so passionate about children, who children get to live with, whether it's them emotionally, psychologically. But one thing that COVID-19 is that it was definitely detrimental to the family system. And what I found is that the government had little to give in response to that. So I really wanted to be the person to help to provide things.
And bridge that gap.
Right. So one thing that we did is that we did a big outreach at school, in a school in Reach Academy. When we were giving parents hampers, I would speak to parents. Some parents will cry, some parents should just say what their home situation was. But the general consensus of everything was that people were gravely impacted by COVID-19, and they felt like they weren't seen. So the response was essentially to allow them to know, listen, you are seen, and there are people who are there to help you and to assist you as well.
That's very true, Adanna. Well, thank you for that very inspirational speech towards the end. Actually, it's really captivated myself. It really captivated in terms of what you're doing in your journey as well, because COVID-19 did reveal a lot of cracks in the surface of the familial setting as well. And there are a lot of stats as well where people got divorced after COVID. Yes, but I have to say that there were benefits of COVID-19 in terms of being more technological diverse and developing technology, etc. But there was there was a disadvantage of looking at the divide, the digital divide, where some children never had access to technology, where when their peers were online, they couldn't join them online, etc., etc. So really, it's really identified to me and become apparent to me that the Response UK was fitting. I'm sure there's definitely going to be space for that now, because there's still the post-COVID effect where some people are still actually struggling because of COVID, and they're still trying to navigate and really reintegrate themselves back into society. But Adanna, thank you. It's been great to speak to you about your very inspirational, intriguing, engaging journey. As a black female barrister, it's really great to hear your perspective on things as well, and saying that, and one key takeaway I'd say for myself is that imposter syndrome shouldn't be a blockage. It shouldn't stop you, but you should, break that cycle and push yourself out of your comfort zone. So everybody, thank you. This has been another episode on the Faith Brunel's Insights podcast. I hope you really enjoyed it and find it very enthralling and engaging. I certainly have been listening to Adanna's inspirational, and it's really her journey's really piqued my interest as an aspiring barrister. So without further ado, everybody, this is your host, Faith Brunel, and I'm signing off. Bye-bye.